be somebody who ends up in the Bucs Ring of Honor. That is something that's we can talk about. And there's going to be a lot of off-season angles, and we're going to go into a lot of different discussions here with this conversation surrounding Tom Brady's retirement. But first, let's just get the first thing out of the way with the fact that he is hanging it up. This was something that we kind of felt after the last game against the Rams. We're on Brady Watch day 9. 9 is where it officially ends. But in the first few days, Tom Brady, who was always very upfront about returning the following season, immediately at the end of the previous one, he did not offer that validation. There's news that's come out that even though in the beginning of the season he talked about playing through his contract and playing into next season, that something along the middle there has changed. Of course, we know that Tom is a family-oriented guy. He has devoted his entire life to the sport of football. And, now he wants to go out and enjoy time with family. He wants to explore other ventures in his life that he's seeking a lot of fulfillment in. That's what he says. And there's no doubt that Tom Brady can go out there next season and be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. That is not debated because he just threw for 5,300 yards this season. He also threw 43 touchdowns. The guy is remarkable. But you know what? In the end, you have to wonder, what is the challenge for him returning at age 45 when he is already the greatest to ever have done it? And no one's going to topple him unless Patrick Mahomes can rattle off, another 6 titles down the road. So that's ultimately what it comes down to. If the Buccaneers would have maybe won the Super Bowl again and repeated, maybe there's a chance he would have returned to be the first ever quarterback to get a three-peat. But since that challenge is not possible, and since he's not going to be able to do the repeating, which hasn't been done since he entered the league, and I know he wanted to probably make time as a flat circle, there really was no incentive, and especially with the Buccaneers organization going through a little bit of a regrouping period, they're not going to be able to bring everybody back. The roster's going to look a little bit different. If Brady would have returned, I think they would have pretty much looked like a formidable group. The Buccaneers would have definitely mortgaged a little bit more of their future to make sure that Tom's happy and they had one more year to try to win the Super Bowl. But that's going to be out of the equation now. So that will be something we continuously discuss. And at this point, Kyle Trask is the only quarterback on the Buccaneers roster. The team spent the second-round pick on the Florida product last year. He is the only person we know who can play quarterback on this team at this very moment. We do not know who the quarterback is going to be next season. So that's going to be something that we're going to have to talk about, especially in the NFC South, where the division is extremely weak. It is not a good one, and the Buccaneers have a horrific schedule coming up because they were so darn good this season. But in 2 years for Tom Brady with Tampa Bay, he won 29 games, took this team to their first Super Bowl appearance since the early 2000s in 2003. Of course, we know back then they won that game, and last year, during the whole pandemic year, the Buccaneers were able to secure their second Super Bowl title, and they went on the road winning back-to-back-to-back games before, ironically, coming home to be the first NFL team to host a Super Bowl and play in it, and then also win it. So at least Brady was able to knock off that accomplishment as well, something that nobody else has been able to do. And the Rams might be able to accomplish that win in this Super Bowl. Again, funny enough, back-to-back years of that happening. Tom Brady ultimately changed the economic scene here in Tampa Bay as well. Tickets, anybody who's ever been a part of gone to a Bucs game and has seen the crowd. Mike Evans talked about it after the Philadelphia Eagles win and the fact that this team was hosting a playoff game for the first time since 2008. He told players in that locker room, do not take it for granted. You don't know how long these moments will last. And for a fan base that was fairly apathetic entering, but pre-Tom Brady, I should say. Of course, from 2009 to 2019, they did not make the playoffs. A lot of early first-round picks in that stretch as well. The fact that Tampa Bay was buzzing over their football team again was something special and something the city rallied behind. And Ray J was bumping, especially those last two playoff games. It was it was quite the scene. And you know, for me, I think about that Buffalo Bills game where Brady threw the walk-off, his 700th career touchdown, including playoffs, and Rashad Perriman in the end zone, and that play's just going wild. There's a lot of tremendous memories for Tom Brady here in Tampa, and you know, a big thank you goes out to him because he really did raise the expectations and the standards within that locker room. I know Bruce Arians talked about that in the press release sent to the media and to the public, is how appreciative he was of Tom to really showcase his talents and why he is the person that he is, and to show it to all the teammates. I mean, everybody on that Buccaneers team having that experience of Brady, it provides a nice foundation for Tampa Bay moving forward. I know that the question is going to be, you know, who's next? Who will the Buccaneers have at quarterback? And I wish I had a good answer for you, honestly. We just simply, we do not know. And I can give you a guess and say that they're going to probably look for somebody in the free agency market. I would imagine that they're going to try and find somebody under a one-year contract. You know, rumors are out there that Aaron Rodgers wants to leave Green Bay, Russell Wilson wants to leave Seattle, but Tampa Bay's in a little bit of a salary cap bind right now because they have mortgaged their future to a certain extent. They definitely need to be wise here to not continuously fall down the hole of trying to win now and kind of having years and years of frivolous play, to put it lightly. So what I think is very possible is that the Buccaneers regroup this year. I don't know who their 2022 quarterback is going to be, but I assume it's going to be a one-year deal. And then in 2023, there are a lot of quarterbacks on the market. Aaron Rodgers will officially be a free agent. Guys like Kirk Cousins will be out there. The draft, if things go sour this year, is much better with the quarterback options. You know, Russell Wilson's on the final year of his deal. So there's just the picture kind of crystallizes in 2023 versus this year, where there's just not a lot of options out there besides Teddy Bridgewater, funny enough, Jameis Winston, Ryan Fitzpatrick. They can also trade for Jimmy Garoppolo, and that would be relatively cheap because the Niners definitely want to move on to Trey Lance. So we're going to have a lot of time to talk about that and the impact of not having Brady, because a lot of players might move on in free agency, and they might select other locations, maybe some more win-now organizations. Maybe they go seek more money, whereas they would have taken a little bit of discount to play with Brady again. So it's going to be intriguing. We're going to hear from Jason Light, the general manager of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, tonight at 6 o'clock. Very interested to hear what he has to say as he's in Mobile, Alabama, scouting future Bucs there, as you know, they still have a first-round pick, the 27th overall. But again, circling back to Tom Brady's retirement announcement, I found it interesting that Tom Brady did not use the word retire in his announcement. He talked about the commitment to the game and how committed you have to be to play at such a high level and what it takes to go into that game, and he just is not willing to put himself through that commitment right now. Does that leave the door open that maybe he would come back in the future? Not necessarily in Tampa Bay, but would he come back in the future? I don't know. All I know is that he definitely left the door open. Whether it's fully closed or not, we're going to find out in due time. You know, Michael Jordan did this dance before. Tony Romo, leading up to last week's game, actually talked about that maybe in a couple of years, Brady will have that itch, and trying to win a Super Bowl at 47 or 48 will be like the challenge that he's yearning for again, and maybe that draws him back into the discussion. But obviously, that's nothing that's on the table for this season. And with the Bucs not having Brady, the New Orleans Saints not having Sean Payton, the Carolina Panthers not looking so hot, and the Atlanta Falcons not looking pretty either, the NFC South is still completely up for grabs, and just because the Buccaneers do not have Tom Brady next season does not necessarily mean that, depending on who they get as quarterback, that they would not be the favorite to win the division again. But yes, 22 seasons, 7 Super Bowl titles, 10 Super Bowl appearances, 278 career victories, including playoffs. This man defied time, and not often, and this is what Bruce Arians actually said, not often do players in a sport get to walk off on their own time. Usually Father Time catches up to you, and we watch excellence wither away, and this once fantastic athlete that we've seen on the field just is a shell of himself. Go through all the greats. Michael Jordan in Washington. Think about like Larry Fitzgerald at the end of his career, Drew Brees at the end of his career, Big Ben, right? Well, Ben Roethlisberger this year. You kind of forget about like how great he was because you're watching him and you're like, this guy can't throw it more than 10 yards. Brady was never like that. We do not know a bad version of Tom Brady. He was always at the top of his game. He was always one of the best in a sport. And that is extremely rare. And as I said before, only Patrick Mahomes has the ability to sniff that conversation, only because he's been to the AFC Conference Championship game 4 straight seasons. He's won 1 Super Bowl. He's got a long way to go. But as I said, it's a long shot. No, it's safe to say that we might never see an athlete like Tom Brady again in a sport with that much international appeal. But what a ride it's been. And it's pretty magical that Tampa Bay was on that ride for 2 years. And even though it was quick, and Jason Light mentioned this in his press release comments, that he wished it could have been longer, but he understands that Tom has committed so much to the game, and he deserves time with his family. And he deserves this, and he deserves the celebrations and the momentous outpouring of support because he is really, despite the history of Tom and the competitor of who he is and a couple of snafus that happened along the way, there was Deflategate, which I don't know has necessarily aged so well. And then also just being attached to some of the things that the Patriots organization did that probably is more towards Bill Belichick than to the actual players. So when Bill hangs it up, we can talk about that a little bit more. But he's truly been a class act, and it's not from like the media. That's from listening to all the players and the ability to come into Tampa Bay's locker room and connect with all of these guys, not just like the veterans like Mike Evans, but the Cyril Graysons of the world, and the guys trying their best to make an impact on this team at a very young age. And Tom's half their age. He's one of a kind, and we're not going to see another Tom Brady in the sport, and maybe in sports in general. Maybe a tad hyperbolic, but I would be surprised in 50 or so years if we're talking about somebody greater than Tom Brady. His entrance into the Hall of Fame, now the clock ticks, assuming that he's not playing again. So he would actually enter with Ben Roethlisberger, assuming he's a first ballot Hall of Famer as well, in 2027. Personally, I would like for the NFL to maybe waive the 5-year clause and to just put him in to the Hall immediately, something that the NHL did for Wayne Gretzky. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it'd be cool. But now we wait. And now we figure out what life is like without Tom Brady. And we don't have to really go through too much of the memory bank to understand that, because it was just a couple of years ago we saw Jameis Winston on the field, and the team was interesting. They certainly put up points and yards and interceptions and all that good stuff. But we're going to resort to a little bit of normalcy, and Tampa Bay won't necessarily be at the epicenter of the football conversation anymore. That inherently stinks. But that doesn't mean that this franchise is not a good place and they won't be successful moving forward, because of Tom Brady and the ability to bring the band back together last year. They were able to bring in a whole draft class where they weren't really given that much responsibility. This year they'll bring in a whole new draft class, and even if they take a step back in 2022, they should be really well positioned in 2023 to make an impactful run towards another Super Bowl, assuming they're able to snag a quarterback of high caliber, which I think the fact that Tom Brady came here and did what he did, and everybody saw what happened, I think it's very possible to assume that it's a possibility. So, again, Tom Brady calling it quits, 22 seasons, 7 Super Bowl titles, 10 total Super Bowl appearances, 3 MVP awards, unequivocally the GOAT. And I just want to make sure and check if anybody has any comments. We got some. Mary, that is a swift blow there. Okay, but you're in the right place. Please continue to follow 10 Tampa Bay, not only on social platforms, but also at 5 o'clock, 5:30, 6 o'clock. We will be continuing our coverage. 10tampabay.com also has everything laid out for you. I mean, we have been building up this story for a few days now, so we are well equipped to give you all the information you need to know. And we will continue to tackle this topic for the many weeks to come, because we will have to then do this. We have to talk to the team. We have to talk to its players. We then have to figure out how free agency is going to go in the middle of March. We're then going to see them at OTAs, and we're going to have to ask them what life is like without Tom there. At training camp, first game of the season. It's a different world now. But you know what? We're going to be here all the entire way, and we'll see how it goes, and we'll still cheer on the Bucs. So thank you for joining me on the Facebook Live. You can find me at my own personal account, at @eklosky_WTSP. You can also find me on Instagram, at @eklosky. And later today, I'll also be on the Locked On Bucs podcast to talk about the Brady retirement and what this means for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers long term. So thank you so much for joining me, and I hope everyone has a wonderful Tuesday.